morning, good afternoon or good evening, wherever you're listening and whatever time you're listening at. I hope you've had a blessed week and God has worked many wonders in your lives this week, and you've managed to find some positives from even a really bad situation that is lockdown at the moment. Just want to briefly come on and speak to you guys about maybe some of the high points, some of the low points in lockdown, and for me anyway, and maybe you can relate to some of them, maybe some of you can't, but I hope this is helpful and in some way encouraging for you guys. So I'd like to start out by saying that lockdown has been a challenge. It has been both mentally and physically draining. I'm sure a lot of you will relate that the sheer scale of the lockdown was initially one of the hardest things to take. But with regards to myself, I've managed to view lockdown as a completely different thing. For me, the few months leading up to lockdown were my lockdown. After going through quite a rough patch the past couple of years with previous surgeries and ill health, the months leading up to lockdown for me were, well, my lockdown. I was in the house, unable to work, unable to go and do normal things, building myself back up to hit the real world hard once it came to the time that I was ready. But for me, as soon as lockdown hit, it was a chance for me to be released. God had blessed me just before lockdown with receiving a job in a local cost cutter, serving the local community for their every need for groceries, for milks, even the odd Mr. Whippy ice cream that I have to say Mum and Dad availed of most, and sometimes Aaron would have called in too. Going through lockdown, working on the front line, it was a challenge. The hours were long. I sometimes would have started at 6 in the morning, not finishing until maybe 11 o'clock that night. Sometimes going in at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and coming out at 1 in the morning, working through the night to ensure that shop, which I must say, if you do need any baking supplies or anything for the coming weeks while you're bored in lockdown, is a brilliant shop for supplies. But the hours were long. The mental time that it took me to recover from each shift was not long enough before I had to then enter yet another shift in the shop. But this was a blessing, a real blessing in disguise. I managed to come out of my own lockdown hurting and struggling from so much pain and surgery in the past, that this was my chance to be like a butterfly coming out of a cocoon. I was able to spread my wings and do something that I truly enjoyed. So going through lockdown working in the shop was a real godsend. God really blessed me with the opportunity to make people smile through a lockdown, through a hard time. Also taking on the duties of delivering groceries to the elderly, the vulnerable, and those who had to self-isolate, which I have to say, for people I saw, was really tough. People, even young people like myself, isolated and unable to do things because of maybe ill health, or a parent who was sick with something that meant that they had to stay indoors. For me, watching that was tough. But seeing the joy in their face, even seeing a different face like myself or my colleague coming up to their door and handing them something so simple as a few bars of chocolate, some cereals and a pint of milk, was it really does your heart good. I mean, within that, obviously I had been able to obtain a new job. God had blessed me with the opportunity nearly a year ago to apply for this job. It was a very long process, it was a very hard process, but eventually God had blessed me with a phone call not more than a few weeks ago to tell me that you have received the job and you will be starting on this date. So lockdown for me, well, it was my chance. This was my chance to do God's work through a local shop, through delivering to the elderly. It was my chance to really show how God's mercy would be able to bless so many people, even from the most simple things, and how God had truly blessed me in all of this. Maybe some of the low points were days off, where I was sitting in the house thinking, I'd love to be in the gym. I'd love to be going and seeing my friends. I'd love to maybe go for a walk somewhere different than Hazelbank or just round the Brambles. And I'd love to see different unfamiliar faces other than the ones that were the regulars in work or my work college, who I have to say were absolutely outstanding. I can't praise them high enough. They were great support for everybody. It was a brilliant team. Going through activities in the house became more and more regular. Family time became more and more regular, which was something that in the past we had struggled to do so much, with everybody's schedules being so busy, with parents, mum, dad being out at work or doing and undertaking other duties. Perhaps maybe the hardest part of lockdown for me was being unable to see my grandfather, who was living on his own, who had no real hobbies other than to spoil us rotten, to spoil the family, to take us places, and nothing he got more joy out of than seeing us happy, taking us to his famous Gleno spot, time and time again. But we didn't mind. It was his happiness. And unable to see him and knowing that he was sitting in the house alone, it hurt me. I'd sometimes question that, why now? Why, whenever he is at the age where he needs us most, does he have to be stuck inside, unable to have any real contact, unable to feel the embrace of his family, which he loves so much and he holds so dear? Even coming up for a simple meal or going to my other uncles and aunties' houses to see them for dinner became a distant memory for him. It became harder to see that happening when, calling at the door, he would have stood at the car and shouted out, just wanted to check up. Unable to go out and actually physically have a conversation with them for longer than a couple of minutes. Knowing that he was getting to the age where he needed us, that made it so much harder. Maybe there would be the odd time where he would want nothing more than to come up and sit, talk and enjoy a meal with some company. Perhaps maybe another low point for myself was starting to struggle with, what am I going to do next? Thinking, God, what have you planned for me next? Obviously with having the job, that was an opportunity, but I felt that there was something more I needed. There was something more I could have done for people. But that's the way lockdown has been going. Now, don't get me wrong, that's majority high and very few low, but I hope it is encouraging for you to hear that God works through people. God works in so many ways that we don't even see. Something as simple as a smile is God's happiness shining through someone. And I am so blessed that He has put me in the position where I am able to do that. I have been able to spend more time with family, which is something that in the past has been a struggle for us. Having dinner together, eating meals that may have been missing the odd ingredient. But the fact that we were sitting down together and enjoying our time together was absolutely marvellous. But I hope in listening to me today I haven't rambled on too much. I don't want to end up making it a sermon or preaching. But I hope that this message has encouraged you, that it has given you something to hold on to as much as I have, and it has shown that God's mercy is unending, that He is the amazing God that we all know and love so well. I hope you have a blessed week, and that lockdown lifts a little bit so that we can all come together again as one in a big church family. But for now, it is goodbye from me, and have a very blessed week.